Alright, finally beat this game about a month after it came out. And actually, I did get Persona 3 Portable when it came out on Steam about a year ago. And I did start to play it, but I did fall off not too far into the game. For a couple of reasons. One, because it wasn't as immersive as Persona 5 Royal was for me. That was the first Persona game I ever played. It got me into this whole franchise, and one of my favorite video games of all time. And two, actually because of something I didn't know at the time I was playing it, which is when you're exploring Tartarus, you eventually will come to a blocked off point, and you can't go further until you progress the story. I didn't know that at the time I was playing Persona 3 Portable. So the game seemed kind of aimless to me, like I didn't know where I was supposed to go, I didn't know what direction the story was going in, and that was pretty much the biggest factor in me falling off the game. But when I heard that this remake was coming out, I was like, you know what, I love the Persona 5 games so much that I'm pretty sure I would love Persona 3 and 4 just as much. So I'm gonna give Persona 3 another try with Reload, and I'm glad I did, cause this game is pretty great. Persona 3 Reload. So Persona 3 Reload is a remake from the ground up of Persona 3, which came out back in 2006, and obviously it is the third main entry in the Persona series, spun off from Shin Megami Tensei. There have been a few different versions of Persona 3 over the years from what I've learned. Persona 3 Portable, which I've already talked about, that was originally a remake for PSP. There was Persona 3 FES, or FES, whatever it's called, which I guess included this whole, like, epilogue chapter, kind of like Persona 5 Royal does. I don't know too much about it, because I haven't played that, plus this Reload remake doesn't include it, at least not to my knowledge. Persona 3 Reload pretty much puts the Persona 5 Royal coat of paint on Persona 3. The graphics are a lot better. There's a brand new voice cast. A lot more scenes include voiceover now. A new soundtrack with new songs and remix versions of the original Persona 3 songs. Yeah, you get it now. It's the shiny brand new remake of Persona 3. The story takes place in 2009 going into 2010, once again in Japan. And the premise is that every night there is a hidden hour between one day and the next called the Dark Hour, in which everything is frozen, no one knows it's happening except for a very small select group of people. And during this Dark Hour appears this giant tower called Tartarus, this tower of demise. There's something evil going on in there. It's filled with these monstrous creatures called shadows, and the only ones who are aware of this, and therefore can do something about it, are the Specialized Extracurricular Execution Squad, or SEES for short. A group of high school students and a dog who have the ability to summon magical beings within themselves called personas, and so SEES is gonna solve the mystery of Tartarus and the Dark Hour and bring it all to an end if they can. And now we have Persona 3. And yeah, I thought this game is pretty awesome. I still don't think it's as good as Persona 5 Royal for me, but I think at this point that's just simply because that was my introduction to this whole franchise. But also, if I am just comparing the two, there are aspects of P5R that I just appreciate more than in P3R. Like, there's no Thieves' Den type place in this game, no card minigame you can play. But I digress, Persona 3 Reload is still awesome. And meeting these high school characters, yeah, they pretty much did remind me exactly of the Phantom Thieves in Persona 5. Like you, the protagonist, whose canon name is Makoto Yuki, he has the ability to summon multiple personas like Ranamamiya, and I imagine the protagonist in Persona 4 as well. But with the other characters, some of the personalities, you're like, oh yeah, they are that other character from Persona 5, I just noticed. Junpei Iori is Ryuji Sakamoto, just straight up. He's the fun-loving guy with a heart of gold who doesn't take things too seriously, and he's not easy to take seriously. Yukari Takaba fills the An Takamaki role, the really close female friend you make who's sweet, but also stern when she needs to be, cause she has her traumatic events in her life. And I guess Akihiko Sonata would fill the Yusuke Kitagawa role, except their personalities actually are completely different. Akihiko's a badass, he's a boxer, he's all about that workout, that grind, he loves a fight. And Mitsuru Kurijo is the Damimami, like Makoto Nijima. She's the student council president, who often takes charge of the situation and knows a lot more information about it than most of the other SEES members. She actually ends up being one of the more intriguing characters in the game. And Fuka Yamagishi is Futaba Sakura. She's a navigator, she doesn't fight alongside everyone in battle. She's more shy and introverted, she's naive. Yeah, you see now, these characters have their roles. It fits. Aigis is the best character in the game. The best character in the game for sure. One, because she's actually unique, and two, because she has the best story arc of everybody. She's a robot, yeah, she was created to be an anti-shadow weapon, but her character arc, is one of those classic AI learning what it means to be human, what it means to live. You've seen that in a million stories before, but it's just done so well here with Aigis that by the end, I almost wanted to cry. I never did cry in this game, but man, there are just some really emotional moments with her. I don't want to have any spoilers in this video, so I'll just leave it at that. And yeah, you did hear me correctly earlier. There is in fact a dog on the team, Koromaru. He's a good boy. And yeah, of course, he would fill the more Morgana role from Persona 5, but he's not really like Morgana. He doesn't speak fluent English like everyone else does. He doesn't change forms when you enter the Dark Hour. No, he's just a dog. There's actually a voice actor who did all the barks and woofs for him. And at first, I'll admit, I was like, what? This is getting weird. A dog? Does that make sense? Yeah, I fell into it. He's a good boy. I love Koromaru. Which then leaves the last two members of the team, the ones I really cared the least about, Shinjiro Aragaki and Ken Amada. Not that they're poorly written or anything. I don't know, they're just the ones I cared the least about. Which is actually kind of a bummer because their story arcs that they have, particularly in relation with each other, include scenes that are among the most emotional in the game. And I got what they were going for sure. But I don't know, I guess it just didn't impact me as much as I felt it was supposed to. There are these villains in the game, this trio known as Strega, and these guys were another aspect that I guess I just didn't like as much as the villains in Persona 5. These guys are just maniacs who want to utilize the power of the Dark Hour. The main guy, Takaya, goes on and on about Doomsday and all this shit. I'm like, alright, Carlton Drake from Venom.
A plan on the brink of collapse.
I've seen plenty of villains like you before, and they're never all that interesting. Chidori, though, the girl, I'll get to later, but I will definitely touch on her. But yeah, these characters, just like Persona 5, you get to know them, and you become really attached to them. I guess that's just how Persona games, or really most JRPGs from what I've heard, work. And the gameplay of Persona 3 Reload, yeah, it is pretty similar to Persona 5 Royal, which yeah, I imagine that is how all the mainline Persona games are. You go to battle, instead of Mementos, it's now Tartarus. There's no like palaces or anything, that aspect is gone, that's specifically Persona 5. It's just Tartarus. You're going up this tower, fighting different shadows along the way, you have these little boss battles with gatekeepers. You're just going floor after floor after floor. Which yeah, at first I was like, that's gonna get really boring really fast, isn't it? It's gonna feel like a grind, just really tedious. But the game does actually keep it interesting because you're training your team, the story's progressing. Plus, every couple of blocks, the aesthetic layout of Tartarus completely changes, which I did not see coming. Like after the first block, I got to the next one, I was like, whoa, okay, the place looks different. That's cool. Cause I'm sure the developers knew we don't want players to get bored with Tartarus, so we gotta keep it interesting. So they did. Props to that. And then the battle system is pretty similar to Persona 5, but there are some pretty big differences. There's no gun option, you can't shoot guns because you don't have guns. It's either persona, melee, or item, or guard. If you hit an enemy's weakness and you get to shift to another member of your team, the baton pass as it's called in Persona 5, there's no power boost with that, which actually does kind of bum me out, but whatever. But one cool battle mechanic Persona 3 has that Persona 5 does not have is called Theurgies. They're essentially Z moves from Pokemon Sun and Moon. They're these special moves that you have to build up a meter to use, and then once you use them, it's like this awesome cinematic cutscene that's really cool. Each character eventually gets 2 Theurgies that they can use. My favorite has got to be Aigis' second one. I'm not gonna spoil what it is, but when I first saw it, I was like, that is the coolest shit ever. It's pretty sweet. And as the story progresses, you come to learn that there is a real big boss fight every time there's a full moon. So that's pretty much the equivalent of palace rulers, I guess, if we're still comparing to Persona 5. I know I really shouldn't be doing that, but what can I say? This is just my experience playing Persona 3 Reload. And then when you're not in Tartarus, you have the social simulation aspect of the game. You're a high school student, so you're going around, you're forming bonds with people. The social links, what are known as confidants in Persona 5, they're pretty similar, although you actually don't have social links with each member of SEES like you did with the Phantom Thieves in P5, just the female members, all of which you can romance, of course. And in this game, I just went ahead and romanced all of them. All the female characters, including Chihiro. Not Yuko though, because at first I was like, I don't want to cheat, but then I learned there's really no consequence in this game to doing that, so from then on I just romanced everybody. Yukari, Mitsuru, Fuka, Aigis, yeah. The only real consequence you get is this awkward exchange of dialogue if you put them all on your team in Tartarus. That's it. Okay then. There is one feature where in the evening, you can choose to just hang out with one of the other members of SEES. This is actually something that Persona 5 doesn't have. You can just hang out in the lounge with one or more of the other team members. It's not for a social link, but it does build up one of your social stats, of which there are 3 in this game as opposed to the 5 in Persona 5. So hanging out with someone in the lounge does actually do something for you. It's not just wasted time. Now, as for the story in Persona 3, wow. And yeah, just like all the other Persona 5 games I played, it did take me a while to really get emotionally invested into the story. And I noticed for this game, it took the most amount of time for me to get really into it. I just noticed, like, I was playing the game, it was going along, you know, big shit was happening, and I was like, alright, typical Persona style shit. The whole Akihiko and Shinjiri and Ken story arc happened, and I was like, okay. Really, it wasn't until I got to Chidori's arc. That's when I was like, oh, now I'm in. That's some really interesting shit going on right there. It was intriguing, it was mysterious, cause she's a member of Strega, she's a villain, but just the story arc she goes through emotionally, it hit me really hard. And from there on to the end of the game, I was in it. Which I guess I'd say is like 3/5 of the way through. I think that's being accurate. So yeah, it did take me a while to really lose myself in the game's story, but once I did, it was awesome. Cause not too long after that, Aigis' emotional character arc comes to the forefront and I was like, oh my god, Aigis is best girl. I know that's the most popular opinion, but there's a reason for that, cause it's true. You'll agree too after you play this game like you should. But really that is the main reason that I don't love this game as much as Persona 5 Royal. Because the story it's not beat for beat the same, but it is pretty much the same vibe, the same emotional tone, the same kind of dialogue with the characters, the same kind of characters. It's really good. I'm not saying it's bad. It's very well written, awesomely animated, all that great stuff. It's just I've seen stuff like this before now. So it's not as new to me anymore. I do think Persona 5 Royal is forever going to remain my favorite Persona game. That's just a call I'm making now. We'll see what happens. As for this game's music, the soundtrack is funny. Cause like I said, I did play a little bit of Persona 3 Portable, so I have heard the original versions of some of the original songs. And yeah, these new remixes for this game, they're not as good, in my opinion. Especially Mass Destruction, the main battle music. The new vocals, they kind of ruined it. Like in the original, it's all baby, baby. This new one's all like baby, baby. And it's weird. That's just one example of how most of the original music in Persona 3 is better than this new music. Still great stuff all around though. But in conclusion, Persona 3 Reload, yeah, it's awesome. I was glued to this game for a month cause it's the same great vibe as Persona 5 Royal, just with a different coat of paint. Awesome characters, awesome gameplay, great battle system. You grow so attached to this crew, that's just how Persona games work at this point. Although some of the dialogue is that anime cringe dialogue. Like when they start talking about the meaning of life and death is all important and time and space and all that stuff. I'm like, yeah, that's every anime talks about that shit. I just personally never got that. But other than those minor gripes I have listed, this is a great game, worth your time and money for sure. Now the question is Atlus going to do a remake like this of Persona 4? Or should I just go right into Persona 4 Golden? Cause I have that on Steam too, I just haven't touched it yet. I was waiting to play Persona 3 first. Now that I've beaten it, it's time for Persona 4. Alright, so Persona 3 Reload. Have you played it? What are your thoughts on it? Have you played any of the other versions of Persona 3? Who's your favorite character in Persona 3? Just what do you want to say about it? Whatever you think, go ahead and leave a comment. And of course, thank you for subscribing. Peace!